Welcome. This video is a basic introduction to the map editor for Eternal Lands. What we'll be doing here is looking at the basics of how to use the editor and what functions are available for it. While this won't cover every single thing you can do, it does cover all the functions you need to get started. What you're seeing is how the editor looks when first opened. A bare initial map with grass ground tiles is shown, and you're looking at the very southwest corner of the map, or what will be known in the game as the 0, 0 coordinates. It's recommended that you open your map editor and check things yourself to follow along. If I'm going too fast, simply pause the video as needed. After the video, I recommend opening already existing game maps, taking a look around at how maps are put together, and using your various buttons to get used to how they work. You can play with these existing maps as much as you want, just don't change any don't save any of the changes that you're making. Here we're looking at an already existing map that you're familiar with to introduce the available editing options. IDA is plenty to work with here. First, you need to know how to move your camera or field of view around the map. Your arrow keys will move you up, down, left, and right as would be expected. For rotating, you need to know that there's two options. One is the home and end keys, which will rotate at specific angles. And if you hold shift while clicking these, it'll rotate in a more precise manner. As well, you can use your middle click button on your mouse and move your mouse to rotate and adjust the height of your camera angle. It's not very precise though, but if you hold your shift as well here, it'll get a much slower and more precise movement. For zooming, the wheel on your mouse will be used more often. To zoom in faster or zoom out faster, you can hold Control while spinning the mouse wheel. You can also use page up and page down to zoom. You will find that you end up using the mouse options much more often unless you don't have a mouse for some reason. A useful key on your keyboard is the letter O, which will toggle you in and out of a top view where you can look directly down on the map. Pressing G on your keyboard will toggle one of the most important tools when making a map, and that is your grid. The grid is showing exact tiles, that is, one step or coordinates in the game. This is an important tool not only because you need it to create the areas that players can walk with height tiling, but as well for placement of your 3D objects, so that they best fit in with walking around them and such. You'll be turning this on and off a lot while you're working on your maps. Pressing the plus and minus buttons will move the grid up and down, so you can use it to work on areas with higher and lower height tiling. Another way to get around your map while working on it is this mini-map. Press M on your keyboard and the mini-map will appear. The red dots you're seeing are just where your 3D objects are located. If you click on the mini-map, it will take you to the location that you click on the map. This is particularly useful when working on larger maps, as the arrow key movement is not particularly fast. Here we can see if there's any lions available for the daily. Or here, a plantation I added with the last update. I was particularly proud of the way the insides turned out for that house. Another option when you're working on outdoor maps is you may want to see how the lighting works at night. By default, you use the day mode on the map. If you press N, you will see the night mode. Besides being dark, you'll see the lights and self-illuminating objects that you don't normally see in the day maps. You can press D at any time to return to day mode. It does not matter if you are in day or night mode when saving the map, as this is just for your own personal viewing. You will, however, want to do most of your work in the day mode, as it's difficult to see where you're placing the objects in the night view. Now let's take a look at this row of buttons you see at the very top left corner of your editor. For simplicity, we'll take them from left to right. By the way, for the first 6 buttons, if you right-click the buttons, it will toggle them on and off. If they're dark, they're off. This is useful during map editing process, and you see it in use here with the unshown object types having dark buttons. The first button on the very left is your ground tiles. These are 2D planes that appear at what is the normal walking level for most maps. They're square and they make up a 6x6 walkable tile area. Your water, lava, sewage, and so on, your fluid-like tiles, appear slightly lower than your normal ground tiles. The second button is your 2D objects. These are solely for decoration and don't really affect gameplay, as players cannot do anything with them. They do, however, make things much less plain, especially the ones that are sides of grass and dirt that are used to basically unsquare the square ground tiles. Your third button is your 3D objects. There are a lot of options here, and unlike 2D options, there's a pop-up we'll look at in later tutorials to more easily select what object you want. The fourth button is particles. Unlike 2D and 3D objects, which are static, your particles actually move. The most common example being fire, as you see here on this map. Particles are represented in the editor by a black square and a basic idea of the particle themselves. They look much more dynamic in the client. Button 5 is your lights. These are only visible in the client when on an indoor map or at night on outdoor maps. While lights can technically be placed anywhere you need them, they can be placed as seen here as light sources for actual 3D lanterns and lampposts, which by default do not provide any actual light. They're just objects. And your 6th button, a very important one, which is toggled off by default, is your height tiles. These represent exactly where a player can walk and what height they are at in that location. You see a lot of green here because green represents the default ground tile level. Yellows and browns are higher levels, and blues and purples are lower, such as are used where you can walk in water, for example. When you press Tab in height tile mode, it'll change how the tiles are shown to you. One way, by default, is flat, where all the ground tiles, where they're all shown at ground level, with only different colors representing different heights. The other is to show the height tiles at their exact heights, as seen here. Hiding the 3D objects, you can see how the height tiles work on these ships, for example. A lot of work gets put into making sure these are done perfectly. The next button that looks like an S is the map mode. You can only do 2 things with this. The main one is setting if the map is a dungeon or not. A dungeon map is better known as an indoor map. Pressing the D button will toggle if it's a dungeon or not. If it's not, it'll be an outdoor map with a sky view and your day and night changes. If it's a dungeon, it'll be indoors, like inside houses or caves, with only a dark overhead, like here. Unlike your night and day modes mentioned before, the dungeon setting is saved with the map, so make sure it's correctly set when you save. The other thing you can do is, if it's dungeon, you can set the base lighting for it. In the bottom left corner, you also saw a RGB list that had numbers next to it between 0 and 1. These are your lighting. In a cave, they're going to be a very low setting because you want the cave to be dark, and most of the light is provided by light objects in the cave. While your indoors for houses and such may have a default higher lighting setting. Picture your own house, for example, light coming through the windows and all. It's by default it's lighter. Here on Ursa's insides, they're set at 0.8, where 1 is the maximum. So they're very highly lit. Your next 4 buttons handle your interacting with objects. The first is Select, which you can use to pick up any object in the object mode you're in, such as 3D objects in 3D mode. Once the object is attached to your pointer, you can move it, or if you right-click, it will be deleted. The second button is the Clone tool, which will create an exact copy of the object clicked on in its exact color, its exact height, and the rotation it was set at. The third button is the New Object button, where you can add new objects from a menu. This is unfortunately not the simplest way to do things. The 3D objects have a special pop-up that will show you the various available objects, and it's easier to work with. Your Skull and Crossbones button is your Kill button, which will instantly delete any object you click on that is of the type of the object mode you're in. 2D, 3D, even your ground tiles can be killed off this way. The next 2 are, of course, your Save and Open buttons. A word of warning, though, the editor does not have a safety check to prevent lost work. Make sure you save often, and make sure you save before closing the editor or opening a new map, or you'll lose any changes you made. The final button is for creating brand new maps. You have 4 sizes to choose from. Very small is quite small and rarely used. The Whitestone PK Arena is on a very small map, for example. The next option, small maps, are ones like in your Portal Room, Desert Pines Crystal Caves, and some outdoor maps like Bethel and Nerelik. Medium maps are the most common. North and South Red Moon, Desert Pines, Morkraven Marsh, and so on are examples of these size maps. And then finally, large maps, which are very uncommon because they are quite huge. Eidolaon and Whitestone are the best known examples of these. If you're creating a guild map, it's important to note that you can only have a maximum size of medium. That is in the rules. A final note, you can turn it on and off your tooltips using the T button on your keyboard. So that's it for now, a basic look at things you can do with the editor.